Welcome, everybody, to the USC channel here at the Voice of College Football, USC Primetime Live. We get you ready for the Michigan State game. And, of course, every Sunday, you can see me, Matt Zemek, with Ethan Inman and our new co-host, new partner in crime, Crash Collier, whose debut was on Sunday. We reviewed the Purdue game. But anyway, Sundays at 5 in the West, 8 in the East, we review the previous game. Tuesday is Preview Tuesday. So we look ahead to the next game. So that's Michigan State. And so, Ethan, Crash, we have a significant injury to lead off tonight. Not the kind of news we want to talk about, but it's the news we have to talk about. Ethan, your reaction to the day's big injury news at USC.
Yeah, so just to clue everybody in, we're talking about Chasen Johnson, who's one of the leading corners on the USC roster. It came out today that he was seen wearing a heavy knee brace after the game and had a mobile scooter at practice today. And then Lincoln Riley came out and said after practice that he's out for the year. So obviously a super big blow for a position group that we've been kind of critical of on the show as it is. So that's certainly not going to help. And it certainly makes some of the other injuries to some of the other corners a little bit more stressful. And, we're hoping that we can get some of those guys back to kind of mitigate the loss of Chasen Johnson, because it's a bummer. I mean, he's a guy who his debut at USC was kind of long awaited because he originally committed to USC and then decommitted and then, eventually came back. So, and was kind of a top recruit and was a guy that, Lincoln Riley and this coaching staff always seemed to be into and had a lot of promise. So for him to not get to play this season is a real bummer for him. We obviously wish him the best and hope for a speedy recovery, but it's also just not good news for this team because, we're already kind of struggling in that room. And, we were kind of hoping he could develop into one of the top corners on the team. So not great news.
I absolutely agree with you there, Ethan, especially when we just talk about like that position group has been struggling, the whole secondary in general, as we really went in depth on Sunday. But then also just think about they're already down with Prophet Brown out for the time being, it seems like indefinitely. And with that, that's just more younger guys who are going to have to step up. And it seems like this is an area where someone's going to really have to step up and elevate their game for this unit, or USC could be in trouble this week against Michigan State, especially if the Spartans opt to throw the ball deep.
So let's, in light of that, let's get into the USC secondary, right? Because we have talked about the instability of this unit, and we're not talking about how players are performing on the field. It's more about just you're not going to get continuity with injuries, with players being out. Like that has created a lack of a consistent rotation, everyone knowing who's playing and how many snaps and what the pecking order is. That's been in flux. That's been fluid. So obviously, it's hard for players to get a rhythm. Athletes in any sport need a rhythm. They need something they can depend on, like to know your role, know how much you're going to play. You want to have those things solidified. They're not solidified. And this Johnson injury obviously exacerbates that particular problem. So, the people who watch this show and the people who follow USC very closely, our most loyal viewers, listeners, such as Bob Springer, such as Jeff Rodriguez, they've been saying, you got to move Kamari Ramsey away from nickel, like the alignment of the defense, who's playing where, how the chess pieces are aligned needs to be different. Does this perhaps give D'Anton Lynn that push to maybe think, maybe I need to have Kamari Ramsey out of nickel? Do you think that maybe this shakes loose the alignment of the secondary in ways that could this is obviously a huge loss. Chasen Johnson, a huge loss. Want to be very clear about that. But maybe this gets D'Anton Lynn to make other adjustments that haven't come yet and which the fan base has been clamoring for. Ethan first, Crash second.
I don't know if this is the thing that's going to get D'Anton Lynn to move Kamari Ramsey, just because I don't see Kamari Ramsey playing on the boundary given his history playing safety. And I also just don't think that there's somebody who can step up and replace Kamari Ramsey. I think Kamari Ramsey's ultimately playing nickel because the injuries kind of require him to, is kind of how I've seen it. Jeff says in the chat, we need Alex Graham back so Kamari can play safe. So Kamari can play safety. And I kind of agree with him there. I think it's more, I don't think subtracting people is going to cause, especially if we're subtracting people at corner and not safety. Like, if Bishop Fitzgerald was out for the year or one of the other safeties was out for the year, maybe we move Kamari Ramsey back to safety. But, moving him to another different position that's not his natural normal position, I don't really see that happening.
I absolutely agree with you there, Ethan. I think, it's like pretty much, I don't see why Lynn would change. It would seem like it would need to be someone coming back that would possibly force Lynn to move Ramsey back to safety and out of the nickel position. So I think Ramsey's going to probably be playing nickel come Saturday.
So in light of all this, who's the guy who really needs to step up in Chasen Johnson's absence? Who's the guy who has to really elevate his game a notch or two to make the current pieces? Obviously USC is shorthanded, so USC's not playing with a full deck. But in this limited context, who really needs to elevate his game to make this secondary work? Crash first, Ethan second.
I think it's really going to just have to be someone in the cornerback room. I think really you just have to I think just
it's a committee. It's a committee.
Yes, for sure. Absolutely.
Okay. Ethan, your additional thoughts.
I think it's got to be DJ Harvey. I feel like DJ Harvey's one of our most experienced guys in the room. He's a redshirt senior. He's been around the block. He was at San Jose State and Virginia Tech. And he's just kind of a guy that's drawn a lot of the fire of Trojan fans for him not playing quite up to the standard that we thought he was going to play. So I think it's got to be him.
We really haven't heard his name a whole lot this season, which, it's for a lack of snaps, because it's not as though, if we had heard about DJ Harvey, it could have been for, the wrong reason, getting roasted. But it's really just been he hasn't played that much. So is that kind of a way, Ethan, of saying or acknowledging that, like, he's just going to have to be thrown into the fire no matter what? Is that pretty much, if not a guaranteed outcome, an extremely likely outcome Saturday against Michigan State?
Yeah, I think the rotation doesn't change too much because Chasen Johnson's already kind of been limited because of, he came into the season injured and kind of had a pitch clock in the 2 games that he did play. Missed the first game against Missouri State. But I just think you can't now rely on Chasen Johnson to come in and save you if you're DJ Harvey, if you're any of these other guys. So I think that, it's more of nobody's going to save me. I need to, especially if you're DJ Harvey, because like I said, he's experienced. He's a guy that was one of the big transfers that we got in the secondary this year that, people were kind of excited about his potential. So you just kind of have to have that realization that nobody's going to save you and you have to, step up and do your job.
I would absolutely agree with that. DJ Harvey's going to need to step up, and it's no one. I think you said it perfectly, Ethan. Just no one's going to be able to save you in this position. It's just he's going to have to step up if this team is going to be successful with Chasen Johnson down now.
All right, so we've talked about the secondary specifically. Now let's kind of just broaden our focus a little bit to look at the USC defense generally in this matchup against Michigan State. And Ethan, I'm going to start with you and then over to Crash for your response. Mobile quarterbacks, they've been a problem for USC. Missouri State, Georgia Southern, slippery, agile, able to avoid pressure, dance in the pocket, get outside a little bit at the last minute, avoid sacks. USC was better at nailing down the quarterback against Purdue. But Georgia Southern in particular proved to be a little slippery, troublesome. Aiden Childs, he's a dual threat guy. So used to be at Oregon State, and of course you have Jonathan Smith, a proven solid offensive coach guiding him, giving him a game plan to go against USC. So Jonathan Smith knows Lincoln Riley. He knows USC. This chess match has happened before. So Aiden Childs, How much of a problem could he pose to USC? What's your sense of how this matchup is going to unfold late Saturday night in the Coliseum?
Me first or Crash first?
Yeah, Ethan first.
Okay. I mean, yes, the mobility of Aiden Childs will be an issue, I think. I was looking at his stat line, and it's real interesting because it's not like Michigan State has played any excellent defenses. I mean, they played Western Michigan, Youngstown State, and Boston College. I would describe none of those as powerhouse defenses, and he's been sacked 8 times. So even though he has the legs, it seems like he gets himself into trouble, maybe holds onto the ball a little bit too much. So I think that is a number that, USC's defensive line and just USC fans in general should be excited about because, that's been kind of the strength of this defense so far is getting at the quarterback. And he seems like a quarterback who's really vulnerable to that. I think that the one concern that I have with Aiden Childs is that he seems to have really cleaned up his mistakes in the passing game this year. He was I think last year was 13 touchdowns, 11 picks. So he was, making a lot of mistakes in the passing game. This year, so far, 6 touchdowns against only 1 interception. Again, the defensive that he's played against, not exactly the best. But I have a feeling he's not going to make those 2 throws in the red zone that Ryan Brown made, especially because, having watched Jonathan Smith coach football for the past few years, especially when him and USC were both in the Pac-12, I just feel like when he gets into the red zone, he's not going to make his quarterback make difficult throws. Like we saw Jonathan Smith bring out the Wildcat package for crying out loud at Oregon State against USC. So I think that's going to be the biggest issue is we can't rely like we did on Ryan Brown on red zone mistakes to save USC. I do think though that the one thing that maybe they should feast on and can, kind of look for Aiden Childs to the mistake that they can look for him to make, like I said, is potentially holding onto the ball too long because 8 sacks against 3 kind of cupcake defenses is not a great total.
All right, Crash, before you dive in on this question, let me just add a small layer to the cake here. And that is, based on what Ethan was saying, do you think Aiden Childs does represent a clear upgrade over Ryan Brown of Purdue, what we saw on Saturday?
I think he does. And I think he's working with a proven quarterback developer in Jonathan Smith. Not to mention, obviously, he didn't play much his first year at Oregon State when he was in Smith's last year there before they both went to the Spartans. But he got to study under DJ Uiagalelei, who has definitely had his moments, but he definitely was, could put together good games. So he had a kind of a good person to really kind of be an understudy for. Plus, he was getting, in-game reps too with the Beavers. And then Smith basically is like, I want you to be my guy when I go to Michigan State. He could have brought Uiagalelei, but opted, no, I want Aiden Childs. It was kind of, I think he wanted him to have that year to grow and develop as a quarterback. And then once Smith obviously decided he was leaving, I think he was like, yeah, I think Childs is my guy, especially then it's, longer term play too with, Childs now being in his 3rd year of college. But I think he definitely does represent an upgrade over Ryan Brown. But I think he's also, and I think I think obviously he can definitely be pretty slippery, good dual threat quarterback. But I think USC, it's more going to be a concern, I think, with the passing game compared to the run game. So I think if USC's defensive line can really, put a lot of pressure on him, I think they'll be able to contain him. But if he's able to air the ball out quickly, and as Ethan pointed out, release the ball quicker, USC could be in trouble on Saturday night.
One of the things that was part of the Purdue game, and we talked about this on Sunday here at the Voice of College Football, Ethan made the point that, USC's defensive line was feasting, getting home early in the game. So Purdue goes to a very quick passing game, and the USC corners were not able to hold up on very quick, get rid of the ball type routes from Purdue. So one would think that Jonathan Smith, he's no dumbbell. He's going to think about get rid of the ball, quick pass routes, pass plays in this game. So, Ethan, how much can Danton Lynn attack early in this game, and especially with the Chasen Johnson injury. Does that force D'Anton Lynn's hand? Does he have to back off a little bit in terms of how he tries to get at Aiden Childs? Or does it mean, no, we're actually going to bring even more heat? Like we need to throw our fastball. We need to get him on the ground. We need to make him nervous in the pocket. We need to make him feel under fire. How do you think this goes? Do you think that D'Anton Lynn revs it up, or do you think that he just has to, reel it back in this game, being a little bit more cautious and to see maybe if his corners can hold up? Is kind of like a teaching moment 1 week before the really big one against Illinois. Ethan, your thoughts, and then over to Crash.
I think it's the same strategy this week as it was last week. I think, it worked last week against Ryan Brown and Purdue. I feel like Ryan Brown has kind of had the better season than Aiden Childs personally. I would kind of disagree with Crash on that one, just because in like most traditional passing categories, Ryan Brown's been better. I think, Aiden Childs certainly has a lot of potential. He was a, highly touted recruit coming out of high school in Southern California. I'll mention because he went to Downey, but I just think that right now Ryan Brown has proven more this year and kind of been better. And I also just think that like Barry Odom's play calling style seems better suited for pass plays and quarterbacks throwing the ball, whereas Jonathan Smith is not the most traditional offensive play caller I've ever seen in my life. So I feel like he is going to want to establish the ground game a lot more, and also get creative with the quarterback running the ball and all that kind of stuff. I think the strategy is the same, and I think especially because we've talked about like Aiden Childs has evidently had some issues getting rid of the ball this year if he's been sacked 8 times. So I just think, and like I said, he's not as great of a passer as Ryan Brown. So knowing those two things, I think you, at least at the beginning of the game, you make him beat you with his legs. If he beats you with his legs in the beginning of the game and, some of that potential starts to come out that we talked about with his dual threat ability, then you adjust and you say, okay, we obviously can't do this anymore. But I think just because he's still a pretty young guy, he isn't quite as settled in the passing game. In the past, he's been mistake prone. This year so far hasn't been super mistake prone, but again, the defenses he's played, So I just think you attack him early. If he stays poised and if he, uses his legs to get out of the pocket, then you adjust. But I think early this strategy shouldn't change, especially since it worked so well last week.
Okay, before Crash answers, Ethan, I got to follow up with one thing that you said, about a Barry Odom offense. Were we seeing the Barry Odom offense, or was this a very unique one-off event in which Josh Henson knew the USC strengths and weaknesses because of his familiarity with USC? It was not a normal Barry Odom offense. It was Josh Henson knowing how to exploit certain parts of the USC defense. Where are you on that?
I think that this is what we can come to expect from Barry Odom in the future. I just think that I feel like Barry Odom and give credit to Josh Henson too. I just feel like they adjusted well, and I feel like just like them in kind of in tandem with Ryan Brown kind of didn't waver and made the correct adjustments. I don't feel like Josh Henson worked close enough with the USC defense or knew especially the current USC defensive starters well enough that this was like some big like masterclass change of plans by him, just because we talked a couple weeks ago when we were kind of trying to explore why the defense struggled against Georgia Southern. Like we talked about how this secondary and the linebackers and the corners and the safeties have seen a lot of turnover, like beyond Kamari Ramsey and Eric Gentry. It's like the Mascarenas Arnold, Issa Mascarenas Arnold's gone, Achille Arnold's gone, and like a bunch of other guys. You have Prophet Brown out. So I think, and like a lot of the guys we've talked about that have been contributors this year, DJ Harvey, Chasen Johnson, and those guys, they're all transfers. And Alex Graham's a young guy if he eventually comes back and contributes. So I just don't think I don't think that Josh Henson knows the guys that played on Saturday well enough that it was some big play by him, especially because, he, couldn't have known the defensive line either. And the defensive line was dominating. And I just think it's it was good coaching by Barry Odom. You know, he realized how USC was attacking, and he made the adjustments necessary because that's just kind of the coach that Barry Odom has shown himself to be over the years. So that's what I'd lean towards.
All right, over to you, Crash.
I think that I agree with Ethan that I think honestly USC should start aggressive and just really try to pressure Childs, see if they can, make him nervous, fluster him, especially if USC gets its way and, has a really, crowd that's riled up, excited to be at the Coliseum on Saturday night. Especially, I mean, the other thing Childs will have too is his body clock could be a little out of sync too with the time change. But back to the discussion, I think definitely you start strong, try to start strong and really pressure him. And if he, proves to beat you with his legs, then you adjust. And I think D'Anton Lynn's a good coach, and good coaches know how to make good adjustments, not even just quarter to quarter, half to half, but even drive to drive. So I'd really like to see them really just start strong, bring a ton of pressure onto Aiden Childs, and then see how he reacts, and then make adjustments after each drive, really break down what's he doing well, where's his weaknesses, and how can we exploit that.
All right. Within this larger question of, does USC attack on defense, or does it kind of, maybe attack selectively, but fundamentally play a little bit more conservatively given the limitations of the secondary? One thing to consider here, should one of the linebackers be spying Aiden Childs in this game because of his dual threat ability? Do you think that it's wise to, just assign one person to a spy-like role, or is this defense not as fully polished enough to warrant that kind of unique attention, and you just stick with your base scheme and you don't try and overextend in certain realms? Crash first on this one, and then Ethan.
I think that's actually could be a smart idea to have a linebacker just on Aiden Childs, at least on the first drive, and then just see how that goes. And if it goes well and it's effective, you keep it. And if it doesn't, you go away from it and go back to a more basic scheme. So I think it's definitely something that USC should really consider starting out with, especially, with the idea of them, really trying to be really aggressive on Aiden Childs to start the game. And then, as I said just a minute ago, just adjust based on how he reacts.
I personally don't think that they're going to assign someone to do that. I just don't think, trying to think about this defense, I think you kind of need Eric Gentry to be that Swiss Army knife that can kind of, affect all areas of the game. And I think that he's too versatile to kind of box into that one role. So that kind of leaves like maybe Desmond Stevens, and Desmond Stevens' decision-making hasn't been the best, as we've talked about through the first few weeks. So I just wouldn't lean towards that. And then, Jaden Walker seems like a guy who could maybe fulfill this role. Like if you were like absolutely certain that you needed a spy guy on Aiden Childs, like he seems like the guy best suited on the roster to do that, just because his instincts and his kind of aggressiveness have been really impressive through the first few weeks. But I just don't think we're at a point in the season where Jaden Walker plays enough. And he's still a true freshman. So I don't know. I think too, just like the guys who have been aggressive and have had good instincts, like I kind of would lean more towards trusting their instincts, and the guys that, haven't, I wouldn't really put in a situation where they have to spy Aiden Childs, just because I'd be worried about them making mistakes. So there's no like kind of in-between guy that I feel like is the perfect fit for that.
All right, since our conversation has drifted into the linebackers, what do you want to see from this linebacker unit against Michigan State? And a related question would be, do you think that supporting the secondary in pass coverage or supporting the defensive line in run stuffing is the bigger, more urgent need for this linebacker group right now? Ethan first, Crash second.
I want to see similar to what we saw against Purdue. I thought that it was the linebacker room's best game by far against Purdue. I kind of said that on Sunday after the show. And so I would want to see them just playing a similar role. And so that means, getting east to west, not letting not letting Michigan State get outside, not, letting them get any of those short little screen passes to the outside. In this game, Aiden Childs' dual threat ability is a little bit more of a concern, so not letting him get out of the pocket and, get to the sideline for big runs. And then, just kind of wreaking havoc in pass rush as well, focusing on stopping the run. So I think a similar role, and I feel like they supported the line more than they did the secondary last game, so I'd want to see them do that again.
And I think that honestly, I feel like maybe do you want them more supporting the secondary just because of the struggles in the secondary? That said, while there is certainly the argument that what they're doing was definitely effective last game against Purdue, helping more with the line, I think that USC may want to, have more support on the secondary to ensure that in case there is any trouble with deep balls, if Aiden Childs does manage to air it out quickly, that there's, support there to, really try to minimize the big plays.
All right, so we've chopped up a lot about the USC defense. Let's now make the transition to the offense, but factoring the USC defense's situation into the equation. With USC's secondary being banged up and limited as it is, do you think that, in terms of Lincoln Riley's mindset as a game planner and a play caller, that we're going to see Lincoln Riley lean that much more into the run game to use clock, keep the ball, limit Michigan State's possessions? Like, do you think that Lincoln Riley's approach to Saturday's game is being altered or will be altered by the injury report and the infirmary in the secondary? Or do you think that, this is Lincoln Riley and USC is USC and we're just going to do what we do? And he's going to call a normal Lincoln Riley game. Do you think that the run-pass mix is affected by the situation in the secondary? Crash first on this one, then Ethan.
I think Lincoln Riley's probably going to, plan the game probably similar to how he does. Obviously, there'll be a few adjustments in the lineup for sure, but I think as a play caller, I think he's probably going to call the offense similar to how he's been calling it. And I mean, obviously, I have been more impressed with his play calling, especially him, using the run game more throughout the game. But I'm also not going to be surprised if he calls it similar and is having Jade Mayava throw a lot of really try to target Makai Lemon and Jacoby Lane because of just their potential with especially not only when their ability to catch the ball, but also how they run with the ball and can just get really just charge down the field and pick up tons of yardage on a single play. So I think Lincoln Riley's probably going to call the game similar to how he does, but I hope he, doesn't, we don't see the Lincoln Riley of last year who, gets discouraged when he sees a few mistakes by his run game, whether they struggle to rush the ball down the field or in the case of, or have a fumble like Wayman Jordan did a couple weeks ago, although I will praise him for, sticking with Jordan even after that fumble.
I think I kind of agree with Crash's point that I see the play calling staying the same. I just don't think that Michigan State's defense has performed particularly well to this point. I mean, giving up 40 points to Boston College, which just got, decently shut down by Stanford, not really a defense that inspires confidence in me. So, and they're not great at creating turnovers. I think they've created 3 this whole season so far. So that's like 1 per game. Not super great at getting to the quarterback. They only have 6 sacks on the year. And you would think that they would feast on some of those lesser teams. So just not a defense I'm very confident in. So I just think that, Lincoln Riley's going to approach it like he has the last few weeks, which is just that, we're going to do what we need to do to get down the field. And this offense, has rarely punted and rarely been held to field goals. So I just think that they're going to approach it like they're, the same juggernaut they've been the last few weeks and put points on the board. And whatever way that they can best do that, they're going to do that.
All right. What thing do you want to see the most from the USC offense against Michigan State? Crash first, Ethan second.
I really want to see USC continue to just have these balanced attacks that are just relying on both the run game and the pass game. I definitely want to see, Lincoln Riley, like we talked about on Sunday, if, Eli Sanders is the running back, despite being more the RB2 in this lineup on the depth chart, having the better game, I'd like to see him get more of the carries compared to Wayman Jordan. That's not to say I don't think you should, spread it out and, definitely take advantage of it. And hell, even, throw in King Miller, who's as a walk-on has been doing really well, And then also obviously Brian Jackson, another capable running back in that room. But I do also want to see, USC, be able to, throw to Mekhi Lemon and Jacoby Lane and really just, have those guys getting their targets and their catches too. And really just having to make Michigan State's defense, defend the whole field and not know what's going to come next.
I think I want to see them play mistake-free football. I want to see them play confident football. I want to see them play disciplined football. I want to see the offensive line dominate again to where it doesn't matter what we're running. Mayav is confident in the pocket. The runners are getting, a decent yards per carry ratio. I want to see Mayava's confidence remain high and just everyone's confidence remain high and just, them to turn it loose and just be confident in their ability to score in a bunch of different ways and getting a lot of people involved kind of like the first few weeks and, getting it to the tight ends, getting it to the receivers, getting multiple running backs in there, just, operating like a well-oiled machine, not leaning too hard on anybody, kind of like Crash said, and just going out and putting up a big total.
I'll tell you what I want to see from this offense. I'm mostly asking questions, but obviously I'm going to get my opinion in where I think I need to. I want to see this offensive line dump truck Michigan State in the red zone. That was one of the issues against Purdue, not finishing drives. USC was moving the ball up and down the field the whole game, didn't punt. Pretty easy to move the ball, but then drives would bog down inside the Purdue 30, inside the Purdue 20, inside the 10. This offensive line needs to not just mash generally, it needs to mash when everyone knows that a run is coming in short space in the end zone. Neither of you remember the 2005 Fresno State game. I'm dating myself here, like I'm the old man in the crowd. But in watching that game on Prime Ticket, I believe it was. I think that was before Fox Sports 1. I think it was Prime Ticket. Petros Papadakis was on the call, and USC had the ball. Third and goal at the Fresno State 1 yard line. And Petros Papadakis said, and I remember this 20 years later, so it obviously stuck with me. He talked about a chest puffing rooster show. You have to strut around and you have to show that you can be the man, you can be the dude. So none of this finesse crap on 3rd and 1. You might score, Matt Leinart bootleg, maybe a little soft toss to the tight end. No, you need to score by ramming it in. You need to pile drive that ball in the end zone. It sends a bigger message. It has a bigger effect. And I think, we know how important the offensive line is to this team. Many people think, I'm one of them, it's the hinge point for the whole operation, because if the offensive line dominates, takes so much pressure off the defense, takes pressure off the secondary, it increases the margin for error for the defense. And last year, the offensive line, was inconsistent generally, but particularly it could not ram that ball through in short yardage situations in the red zone, particularly the game at Washington. Lincoln Riley did try to run the ball inside the 10 at Washington. Up in Seattle, O-line couldn't get it done. So coming off the Purdue game, in which this offensive line generally was very good, the main flaw, not being able to be skull crushers inside the 10, inside the 20, that's what I need to see from this offense in particular. This offensive line just becoming dudes when the opponent is expecting a run. It's a lot like baseball. Dodgers coming up on the playoffs here. You're getting the 100-mile-an-hour fastball from Joan Duran, and you can still be on top of it and you mash it into the Dodger Stadium pavilion. That's when you're ready to win and compete at an elite level. So the opponent knows it's coming and you're able to do it anyway. That is really what creates a champion, what creates a top-tier team. That's what I want to see from the USC offense. All right, let's step back now and just talk about this matchup generally, not offense versus defense, defense versus offense, just generally. Ethan, you alluded to this earlier that Michigan State might have seemed threatening on a certain level to a certain degree, but then Boston College lost to Stanford, and Michigan State beat Boston College 42-40 in overtime. It came down to the 2-point conversion lottery against Boston College. So, essentially a tie, and that was a Michigan State home game. So if Michigan State basically plays Boston College to a tie at home, and Boston College can't beat a god-awful Stanford team, and it wasn't a blowout, but it wasn't a squeaker either. 30-20, like Stanford was solidly better than Boston College. Stanford shut down Boston College's offense throughout the second half. So if Stanford is 10 points better, and that score reflected Stanford's control of that game. If Boston College is 10 points worse than Stanford, and Michigan State played Boston College to a virtual tie for all intents and purposes at home, that has me feeling pretty good about USC's ability to win this game without too much drama, kind of what we saw against Purdue. Crash first in this one, Ethan second.
I think it's going to be an interesting matchup for just a lot of reasons. Obviously, you got the whole Troy versus Sparta thing that we saw last year, I think, when USC hosted Michigan State men's basketball at Galen Center. And you got a lot of Michigan State fans and alums who are probably going to show up to this game who are in SoCal, not the ones back in East Lansing who are griping on social media. But I think we'll see a lot of Michigan State fans there, and I think it's important for USC fans to show up too. But that being said, I think it's going to be probably USC should be able to take care of business, but I'm still really intrigued by this matchup, especially for how much, when USC was still in the Pac-12, like we've talked about a little earlier, with Jonathan Smith now being on that opposite sideline of Lincoln Riley, and how much of, you could say a bit of a hell he put Lincoln Riley through for that win. Now, granted, that game was at Reser Stadium in Corvallis, but still, I'm definitely really interested to see in this matchup, especially if, Jonathan Smith is going to be, potentially a candidate for some of these other jobs that head coaching jobs that have been opening up over the last couple of days. And I'm just wondering, is he, trying to see if he can, maybe, increase his payout in some capacity. So I'm really intrigued by it for a lot of reasons, especially with just Jonathan Smith on the other sideline. A coach who's, did well at Oregon State, built that program up to a respectable level before he left. And I think we'll have, even though I don't think Michigan State wins this game, I think he's going to have good success at Michigan State in the years to come, assuming he stays there.
I do think that, Jonathan Smith poses somewhat of a matchup problem for USC. But I do think his kind of reign of terror at USC is over. And by reign of terror, I mean, obviously 2021 to 22, because in 2021, they came in and beat USC at the Coliseum for the first time in 60 years. And then in 2022, they took USC down to the wire in Corvallis, as Crash so aptly mentioned. I think that Jonathan Smith is a talented coach, and that game against Oregon State in Corvallis was really masterfully called. But I just don't think that he has the defensive talent to have that kind of, to play that kind of pitching matchup against USC. Basically, like I don't think we're looking at that kind of strong, because of games like the Boston College game. I just don't, and they don't create turnovers. Like I said, they don't get to the quarterback too much. Like I said, so I do think that they should win pretty handily. I especially if they play like they did against Purdue. I think the danger becomes, if they can't get to the quarterback or they're not stopping the run. If they're not stopping the run, then this game gets way more interesting than it should be. But as long as they stop the run at a level similar to what they did against Purdue, then I think that they'll be fine.
All right. So, Crash, you mentioned, want to just follow up on something you said. You said you think there's going to be a good percentage of Michigan State fans in the Coliseum. What kind of environment are you expecting? And the thing that we want to talk about is this letter that the USC football program put out. So, Crash, your impressions about the crowd. Like, this is always a parlor game in Los Angeles because of the prevailing storyline. There are so many other entertainment options, et cetera, et cetera. what would be your ballpark figure for the crowd, and what are your impressions about the letter that USC and Lincoln Riley put out this week? And then, of course, I'll turn it to Ethan for the follow-up.
So I think I think USC will have the majority of the fans there. I think they'll probably have, let's say, 85 to 90% of the fans, but I still think you could still get a solid number of Michigan State fans. Obviously, with the Big Ten, I think it's like every school they have to allot at least, I think it's 3,000 or something like that, or there's some percentage that each school is required to allocate to the visiting team's athletic department. But I think Michigan State fans, especially ones out in SoCal, are going to come out here. And especially, I think because of this now, I think it makes it easier for these Big Ten fans on the West Coast to be like, all right, let's go to a game. But I still think USC is going to, but I'd say 55, 60,000 fans, I'd say, would be at this game, especially if the late kickoff may deter a few. But I think with regards to this open letter, I think USC is sensing both Michigan State fans out here, their excitement to come, as well as maybe USC fans either saying, oh, maybe I'll go do something else that isn't quite as late and won't run till midnight or 11 p.m. So I think this letter is basically saying, we need you guys. We want you there. We feed off your energy. Like, we play better. Like, we feel your passion when you guys are in the stands. So I think it's pretty much they're trying to basically make the Trojan family feel like they're like part of the team in that regard, to where it's like, we're counting on you guys as much as you're counting on us. So I think it's really just to try to, really bring some unity between the football team and the Trojan family at large.
So I think, to kind of ascertain how the split's going to be, I think back to some of the games last year at the Coliseum. And Big Ten fans did travel really well. I mean, Nebraska traveled well. Penn State traveled well. So I think we could see a lot of Michigan State fans. I also think it's important to think about that Michigan State USC game last year at the basketball game that happened at Galen Center, because that famously had a lot of Michigan State fans at it, to a point where it was something that USC fans were talking about on social media after the game. And even in the lead up to this game, like, what the heck, why are there so many fans at this basketball game? I think, though, that Michigan State basketball and Michigan State football are in kind of different worlds of, like, just how, basically states of their program, because, Michigan State basketball has been nationally relevant for the last several years, and the football team, not so much. So I do think that that's going to affect it a little bit, like, our Michigan State fans, especially the ones in East Lansing, are they going to spend kind of the pretty penny to come all the way out here to play against, to see their team play against USC? It's a team that went 5-7 a year ago and, struggled against Boston College. Like, I don't really know how much you're going to actually see that. But in regards to the USC fans, in regards to the open letter, I think one thing that I want to point out first and foremost is at the bottom, it's signed by Lincoln Riley, but it's also signed by Chad Bowden, which I think is really important and really interesting, because USC, and I like to give Lincoln Riley the benefit of the doubt. I am someone who, ever since he got hired, I give Lincoln Riley the benefit of the doubt a lot. One of the main criticisms from USC fans about Lincoln Riley, though, has been kind of his lack of interaction with fans and, alumni, students, just generally, like, trying to entice them to come to football games. Like, he's not a very personable person off the field. So it's very interesting that, Chad Bowden gets hired, and then all of a sudden this letter gets sent out, when Chad Bowden, kind of in contrast to Lincoln Riley, is very, like, USC football pride. Love this program, have dreamed of, working with this program, know, very clearly from day one, knew everything about, the program's history, and now this letter comes out. So super interesting. I think it's also, we talked about it in the members only video that we posted. So members only video, you should check that out. But obviously the game time is very relevant to this game because it's starting at 8 p.m. And I think that is genuinely going to be the deciding factor whether or not people come to this game. And so I think that they're kind of trying to mitigate that, because it's obviously not really in USC's control when the game times are, because that's up to the networks. They to kind of mitigate that problem, have sent out this letter. And I think it'll be actually decently effective. After seeing this letter, it makes me want to go to the game more. I was already thinking about going, but now even more so after seeing the letter, because I think that, it's kind of a challenge to USC fans and a challenge to not be intimidated by the time. And if I'm going to go on the podcast last week and on the members only video and say that the time shouldn't matter, then I can't be hypocritical about that. But overall, I think the letter is solid. I think it's all true. I think that it's also kind of a sign that this program is taking this game seriously. Like, I don't think you're going to see a similar letter sent out before Northwestern on Friday night, because it's Northwestern and it's Friday night. But because this is, an early season game against Michigan State, momentum is really needed and necessary. I just think that that's kind of why they see this as an important game. And I think having the crowd noise rattling Aiden Chiles, getting in the heads of the Michigan State fans. I think that Jonathan Smith and Aiden Chiles are both local guys. So I think part of it too is turning the Coliseum from a place where they're excited to play and comfortable and, just excited to be in general, to a place that they're intimidated by, I think is also kind of important. So I think that those are all good signs, because, I think that we're going to win this game handily, but, a potential issue that I brought up before Purdue last week, and I'll bring it up again, is not taking this game seriously, because you have to take every game in the Big Ten seriously. So I think this is a good sign that they're doing that. And they know that, fan attendance could be the difference, not necessarily between winning and losing, but between comfortable winning and kind of stressful winning, if that makes sense.
All right, Ethan, if you can remove that letter from the screen, a members-only video was being talked about. What is this members-only video? Well, let's present this, okay? So on Sunday, Crash, Ethan, and myself talked about the point that if you want to join the USC channel as a member at the Heisman middle tier or the National Champions top tier, you get access to bonus segments. So we cut about a 15 to 20 minute bonus segment, a bonus cut, talking about this late kick and the reaction to USC fans and how Trojan fans and the Trojan family are thinking about these late kicks and what the preferences are and just what kind of the football culture is among the USC fan base. So again, you get these bonus cuts, and Crash, Ethan, and myself, we're going to be cranking these out, especially during football season, also during basketball season as well. You get these bonus segments if you join at the Heisman middle or National Champions tier, the top tier. So that is part of what we are offering here at the Voice of College Football. And just on the heels of that, we also want to mention Ethan is modeling that beautiful USC camo cap. Doesn't it look great? And so if you go to vocfb.com/shop, you can get your hands on a vocfb.com or vocfb cap and with USC, and it can either be the camo or the classic black. And of course, there's other merchandise, shirts, tumblers, coffee mugs. You go all on and on down the line. This is just the generic VOCFB stuff, but you can get all of this with USC on it. So that is part of what you can have here at the Voice of College Football when you buy that beautiful VOCFB USC cap. It supports the USC channel. So it supports Ethan, myself, and Crash. It also supports Mark Rogers and the Voice of College Football, helping us to grow and give you more of the USC and national college football content that you crave. So want to get those advertisements into this broadcast. And speaking of advertisements, here's one. We're going to see you in a minute on the other side for the final segment of our show.
College football is even more exciting when you've got some action on the line, and the games are even better when you're cashing in. And the Voice of College Football is the place to be to get the greatest value. Start with my picks. 75% against the money line, 58% against the spread, and I've got a 40-plus year track record. 11-0 in the college football playoff for me last year against the money line, 8-3 against the spread. And I'm just the warm-up act. Steve Merrill of Wager Talk is our ace in the hole. showstopper. 7 years with the voice of college football, over 30 years in the industry. Steve gives us analysis on all the big games, but you can't miss Steve's weekly under-the-radar pick. 28-12 against the spread the last 3 years. You also get picks from some of our top analysts here at the Voice of College Football, including Corey Bratta, Matt Zemek, and Steve Dace. Check out those numbers. Become a YouTube or Patreon member for just $99 per month. Go to the main channel on YouTube, click join, and then select the betting tier. Do the same thing on Patreon. Make 2025 a winner now.
And so we remind you that Mark Rogers' National College Football Show comes to you every night, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. So, of course, he was going head-to-head with our show, but you can find him every night, Monday through Saturday, 6 days a week, 6 nights a week, I should say, to get the best in national college football coverage. Okay, on the heels of that college football betting advertisement for VOCFB, let's chop this one up, guys. So USC, a 17.5-point favorite. The over-under, 56.5. Which way are you leaning on either of those props? Ethan first, Crash second.
I think USC is going to cover. I do see them, the margin of victory being greater than 17.5. Over 56.5. I'm going to say yeah, just because I think that USC is more effective offensively than against Purdue. So I think that they're going to put up a big total. And, I'll give some credit to Aiden Childs' dual threat ability. So I think that, Michigan State's not going to be scoreless. So I'll take the over also.
I'm going to agree with Ethan on this one. I think USC's going to cover, take care of some business on Saturday night. That said, though, I do agree that I think Aiden Childs, even if USC does play effectively and schemes and makes the proper adjustments, I think he'll still have some success against USC and its defense. And so for that reason, I still think it'll be the over on the total.
Yeah, I think the stronger play here is the over. I think USC is going to get into the 40s. So that's going to carry the overall total well over 56.5. I like, this could be a 70-point game, and that kind of gives away what I'm thinking here. I do think Michigan State scores a decent amount because I think Aiden Childs is a better quarterback than Ryan Brown of Purdue. And I don't think everything's just going to snap together in a banged up and limited secondary. So my main play is the over. That's my main play. I would actually kind of stay away from the spread, but if you ask me, I would take Michigan State plus the 17.5. I think this game comes in at 42-27 USC. Trojans by 15. They're still going to win comfortably, but 17.5, still a bigger number. If it was 13.5, then I would be hammering USC minus the points. Okay, so that's our prediction for the game, but we have one more thing to talk about. Over in Westwood, and this has been a topic in the chat, people with a lot of things to say, and two parts to this. First, one part is, what do you think about the UCLA coaching search generally? But the part that's really interesting to USC fans, we all know it's coming. Like, I have to ask you guys about this. D'Anton Lynn, he was at UCLA 2 years ago. He was the defensive coordinator. And thank goodness Martin Jarmond, absolutely bungled that whole transition. He didn't fire Chip Kelly right away, right after the end of that 2023 regular season. He dithered, he dilly-dallied, and that enabled Lincoln Riley to swoop in and poach D'Anton Lynn, just a godsend for the USC program. But, D'Anton Lynn's not going to be defensive coordinator at USC forever. But, does he stay here to try and win a national championship? Does he stay here to kind of burnish his credentials and kind of maybe carve out like a 2, 3, 4 year career? Or does he want his hands on a D1 head coaching job? Is he going to go to the NFL perhaps? Is that going to be his next stop after USC? Let's just talk about D'Anton Lynn relative to the UCLA job and D'Anton Lynn's coaching future, because it's an obvious point of conversation in USC circles this week. Ethan first, Crash second.
I actually have kind of a strong opinion about this, and I wrote an article about it today. I think that there's no way at all that he goes to UCLA, period. End of sentence. I just don't. I think that he has so much going for him right now at USC. Like USC has some of the best position coaches in the business, handpicked by him. You know, full disclosure, right? They have Rob Ryan, they have Eric Henderson, Doug Belk. Yep, dog work. And like UCLA is in shambles. Like UCLA is they're going to be building from the ground up. It's going to take him like 5, 6 or more years to get them to any kind of national prominence if he's lucky. So, just on a basic level, it looks like that. But also, Dan Lynn's not stupid. Like he knew when like the whole Chip Kelly transition was happening that he had a shot at the head coaching job. Like it seems really because Chip Kelly was looking at NFL jobs like that entire time before he ended up going to Ohio State. Like Chip Kelly wanted out, just as much as the university wanted him out. So I don't think that there's any world where, Danton Lynn is like, oh, USC offered me, I'm going to go to USC. And then like a couple months later when Chip Kelly leaves, he's like, oh, I kind of regret that. I want to go back to UCLA. Like there's just no shot. Will Danton Lynn eventually become a head coach somewhere else? Absolutely. Will he get NFL opportunities? Certainly. Is now the time to leave? Absolutely not. He has too much going for him in the, at USC in the coaching department. They're paying him plenty of money. He has that great 2026 recruiting class coming in. Not all of them are going to follow him to UCLA either. If, he can't just assume that he, goes across town, that all of his recruits are going to follow him. Some of them will, but some of them are getting paid top dollar by USC as well. And, are committing to the position coaches and all that kind of stuff. Like USC is just so much of a better environment to recruit players right now. So it would be a colossally dumb move for Danton Lynn's career, for, his hopes at even moving up beyond the UCLA job. I'm not even saying Danton Lynn will never coach at UCLA again. There's no world in which him moving to UCLA in 2026 makes any sense to me because, like I said, everything's going for him right now at USC. He has the opportunity to compete for a national championship potentially, especially depending on how this year goes. The only way that I can see it happening is like USC's defense, like magically by the end of the year is like top 5 in the country. They go undefeated or lose one game and win the national championship. And then it's like, well, I've accomplished everything I need to at USC, so maybe I'll pack up and leave. But like, that would be like the dream scenario. And I think even then, like, it's like, why leave when you have a chance to run it back and you have all these top recruits coming in that, you recruited. And he has Chad Bowden too, one of the best, rising young GMs in college football. There's just so much going for him right now. And, the move to USC has been so good for his career and so good for outsiders, perception of him as well. Like people are only going to want him more the longer he stays at USC. They're only going to want to pay him more money. The NFL is only going to give him a longer look. Like there's no reason for him to go and lead a very sad, very sorry UCLA program for the next 5 or 6 years before they become relevant again. And UCLA is going to have plenty of people who want to coach there. It's not like a program that's dead in the water. They're still UCLA. They still have the history. There's plenty of group of 5 coaches and coordinators at other schools that will want to come. And I'm sure they'll pursue Danton Lynn, but I'd be surprised if Danton Lynn even took an interview with UCLA. I just don't think there's any reason for him to leave it at all.
I think he would if it's maybe the only job that he gets. And I think we got to keep one thing in mind. We're heading into week 4. So far, only 2 coaches have been fired at the Power Conference, have been fired so far. And more will follow. That's inevitable. I mean, it seems like from all accounts that Florida's Billy Napier could be next, especially if the Gators lose this week, and then they'll be going into a bye. But I think he would take it just because he seems like he wants to advance his career. And I mean, we saw last year that he could have gone back to his alma mater in Penn State. James Franklin was in LA to personally court Lynn to come back and be a Nittany Lion again. And Lynn refused. I think I'm going to assume he likes being in Southern California. And it sounded like when he left UCLA, he didn't even have to move houses. So that's convenient. And 2, also, I think he's got his eyes on a head coaching job. Now, whether that's UCLA or elsewhere, I think he could be gone after this year, and I don't think anyone can blame him for it. But if UCLA is the only one that offers, I think he's going to take it because I think he wants to, oversee an entire program. Although it definitely doesn't help.
All right. This is a yes or no question. No explanation, just yes or no. If UCLA fires athletic director Martin Jarmond and comes up with a big restructuring plan, does this change any of the calculus related to D'Anton Lynn? Yes or no?
No.
I think it could, though. I think that was kind of what I was going to. So I think,
maybe / yes. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So that's the D'Anton Lynn part of the UCLA head coaching search. Now let's just go into the general head coaching search. Any names other than D'Anton Lynn? Let's just remove D'Anton Lynn from the picture. Any other names, if hired at UCLA, that would have you going, darn, UCLA got a good hire. Oh no. Is there any name like that, or is UCLA just such a dumpster fire? It doesn't matter. How about your takes on that? Ethan first, Crash second.
I don't really see them getting that kind of name just because of the state of the program. Like, I think that they'll pursue that. It would have to be like a rising group of 5, like Dan Mullen. Dan Mullen might be the only one. I think that Dan Mullen's the only guy who I could actually see going to UCLA. John Gruden, actually, Archer Quick in the chat. That's another one, because John Gruden's just not getting any job offers anywhere else. So that would be one, because if anybody's going to be desperate enough to go to UCLA with the kind of resume that would make me scared, it's John Gruden. But aside from him and maybe Dan Mullen, I just don't think UCLA has that kind of pull. I think that they can make a good hire? Absolutely. I think that they could find someone in the group of 5 that turns out really well for them, but I don't think they have the pull right now to get somebody besides Dan Mullen that's really gonna grind my gears, so to speak.
One name that I've been hearing popping up from just reading and I've been hearing over the last 2 weeks, and this has been even last year, that I think especially John Canzano of johncanzano.com, as well as John Wilner of the Bay Area News Group, have talked a lot about, is Jonathan Smith. So that one I've kind of just been thinking about, but I'm just wondering, would he want to? It makes sense. Obviously, he's got the ties to LA, but it seems like, would he want to hold out maybe for USC? I feel like, or maybe a bigger job like that, or Washington, if he's going to come back to the West Coast. I feel like he would not want to go to UCLA, especially with the situation and especially with the way that UCLA is conducting their search. It's not just Jarman and a couple of his associate ADs. They're assembling this committee of, I think they said, sports and business executives and UCLA greats, I think is what it was. And that doesn't seem like it's not going to really, help. It seems like if you're going to make this hire, it's got to be the AD going, okay, this is the guy I want. We're going to support him and make sure he gets everything he needs to support to win. And so for that reason, I know they talk about him like he's going to go, but I don't know if I'd see Smith. I'd see Smith holding out there, especially because it seems like he's got a solid thing at Michigan State at the moment.
All right. I just want to offer an extra note on this, and I'm not predicting what's going to happen. Okay. I want to be very clear about that. But, people mentioned John Gruden. There's something unique about John Gruden, and there's another person who has something in common with John Gruden, and that's Pat Fitzgerald, the former Northwestern coach, recently got exonerated in court, reached a settlement with Northwestern, so he's going to be back on the open market. John Gruden and Pat Fitzgerald are both unemployed. So what that means is UCLA can interview them now. And that doesn't apply to any of the other coaches on the market. That is just something to watch for. I'm not predicting anything, but I'm just saying UCLA is at liberty. UCLA is free to have conversations with those guys, hire them now if it wants to, and kind of get rolling on a new NIL plan, a new recruiting strategy, lining up a new AD, everything. So those are just 2 names to watch for, purely in terms of if UCLA wants to do something preemptively. Those are 2 options. And specifically with Pat Fitzgerald, let's mention this other point. Luke Fickell is on the hot seat at Wisconsin, and of course is staying in the Big Ten. Pat Fitzgerald would be a natural fit in Madison with the Badgers. I mean, tough physical football, great linebacker play, like the things that Wisconsin is known for, the things that Wisconsin prides itself on, Pat Fitzgerald can revive and deliver to Madison. Of course, being in the Midwest, it would probably be where Pat Fitzgerald would want to go. So, like, if I'm Wisconsin's athletic director, I'm thinking about firing Luke Fickell now so that I can, get Pat Fitzgerald in the door. And UCLA might want to think about, let's lock down Pat Fitzgerald now so that Wisconsin can't make a move. So just not predicting anything, but just those are, in terms of the chess pieces and the chess moves and what schools can do to address their coaching situations in the Big Ten. Like, those are two Big Ten coaching situations, something to think about as we move forward. All right, so it's been a light night. We have our loyal warriors in the chat. Slap Happy $5 super chat. Slap Happy, you roll. Jeff Rodriguez, you're the best. Bob Springer as well. The loyalists leading the charge, but it wasn't a large crowd. But we want to say for our loyalists and everyone else tuning in that if you want a second hour, we're obviously not having a second hour tonight, but if you want a second hour of Ethan, Matt, and Crash on future shows, $150 of super chat donations. And once again, we don't want one person dropping a C note. We want 10 people dropping, 12 to 15, or 15 people dropping 10 to get us to that $150 figure. We'll give you a second hour if we get the contributions. Also, a reminder, we'll be back at you on Sunday, 5 o'clock in LA, 5 o'clock in the West, 8 p.m. in the East to review the Michigan State game. And then on top of that, as we told you earlier in the show, we're doing bonus cuts, bonus segments. So Ethan, Crash, and myself recorded one on the late kick, what USC fans think about it, the football culture at USC, like these 15 to 20-minute bonus segments. If you join at the middle Heisman or top national champion tier on the USC channel at the Voice of College Football, you get access. You get insider access to these bonus cuts, Ethan, Crash, and myself in some combination. Sometime it'll be the three of us. Sometimes it'll be two of us. We're going to be chopping up these new bonus cuts and bonus segments to give you value for your USC membership at the middle or top tiers here at the Voice of College Football. So for Crash Collier, for Ethan Inman, this is Matt Zemek. Thanks for watching and listening tonight. We're going to see you on Sunday to review